active elements. Another one is passive elements. Active elements, they generate the energy. For example, voltage source, this or that, those are voltage source, or current source. These sources generate the energy to other devices. Passive elements, they absorb the energy, such as resistors, capacitors, inductors, and those elements. We know resistors, we probably know them from junior high school. See, this is a picture of all of those resistors. They have different band of code to tell you the value of resistors. So there is specifications how to read the color band. Resistor symbols is R. The unit is ohm. Symbols in the circuits, that's this. If we see this symbol, that is resistor. Let's further talk about the active elements. Active elements actually have two kinds. One is independent sources. The other one is dependent sources. Let's look at the independent sources first. This type of sources does not depend on other factors, other quantities in the circuit. For example, this is a battery. This battery is independent. They provide some voltage to some devices in the circuits, or this symbol. So this is physical battery. This is a symbol we use in the circuits. This is independent. So there are current source as well. There are some devices provide us certain current. All of these are independent source. They provide the voltage or the current without depending other quantities in the circuit. By the way, we talk about ideal independent source, which means that this voltage source does not change with time. For example, if it have 5 volts today, it will have 5 volts tomorrow. 1 month later, it still have 5 volts. So just ideal. We do not consider the decay or the loss of the voltage with respect to time. Next source is dependent source. So by the meaning of dependent source, the source depends on other quantities in the circuit. We know active sources has two types. One is voltage, voltage source. The other one is current. Those are two formats of active sources, which means that this source, either the voltage source or the current source, is dependent on other quantities such as voltage or current inside the circuits from other branches, from other devices. There are 4 types of dependent source. Controlled source. Dependent source, which means that the source is controlled by other quantity. There are only 2 types of quantities in the circuits to control other sources, voltage and current. Voltage controlled voltage source, you can see VC, VS, or a current controlled voltage source, or a voltage controlled current source, or a current controlled current source. Okay, so those are all shorthand. These are the symbols. Controlled sources, the voltage source or the current source, the controlled source are represented by diamonds. For the independent source, the voltage source and the current source, okay, so this is a voltage source, this is current source. You can see the symbol is round. So whenever you see the symbol of voltage source or a current source which are round, which means that this device, this element is not controlled source, is independent. Let's look at first the voltage controlled voltage source. So the symbol is the voltage source. When we talk about voltage source, they have signs, a positive sign and negative sign. This is an illustration purpose. In the circuits, you have independent source here. There is a device here. So the voltage on this device is Vx. this voltage source is controlled by this voltage, so it is equals to Vx. It does not have to be equals to Vx, so this can be equals to anything, for instance, 2Vx and negative 5Vx, whatever it is. This is just illustration that, okay, the voltage here equals to Vx. This is the ideal simplified notation, but doesn't mean that this has to be equals to the quantity here. To understand this, the voltage source here, this is a voltage source first, and this is controlled by this quantity, and this quantity is voltage. So therefore, the name is a voltage controlled a voltage source. The unit on here is a voltage. The unit is volt. Let's look at current controlled voltage source. Okay, so the symbol is, this is a voltage source first. Therefore, this is a voltage diamond, which means it's a controlled source, and it has plus sign and negative sign here, which means it's a voltage source. This is, again, this is a simplified notation here. There is a circuit here. The current here is Ix, and this voltage source is controlled by this Ix. The voltage equals to Ix, but it doesn't has to be equals to Ix. For instance, Vy here. Okay, so I call this voltage here Vy. Vy can be equals to 2Ix. That will be equal, Vy can be equals to minus 10Ix. Just for instance, okay? It does not has to be equals to Ix here. Sometimes this notation is a little confusing. What's the unit? The unit on Vy, I'll write it down here. Unit of Vy is volt. And then people will say, okay, because it's Ix, why is not why is not A? Why this the unit of what this source is current, because it's for current controlled. So to understand this, this is a little confusing. This is a controlled source, okay? First of all, this source is voltage source. So therefore, the unit is volt, voltage source. Whatever the voltage source is controlled or independent, which means that, okay, I don't care this voltage source is dependent or independent voltage source, the unit has to be volt, million volt or whatever it is, right? Sometimes we're confused by, oh, is a current here. There's a Ix. So the unit of Ix, the unit of here, the current is A, is amp. We were thinking, okay, so because it's Ix here, so the unit of Ix will carry over here. In this case, it's no. To understand that is the controlled voltage value, the value of Vy is controlled by the value of Ix. If Ix equals to 3A, then we're going to take this example here. Then Vy equals 2, Ix equals to 3, 2 multiplied by 3. Okay. Just being consistent. 2 multiplied by 3, that will be 6 volt here. This Ix does not carry the unit here because it's a controlled source. It's controlled by the quantity, how big this current is, but it's not controlled. It's not controlled by the unit here. This is the key to understand the unit in the controlled. Let's look at the voltage controlled current source. Again, when we talk about a current source, we have arrow. We have an arrow to indicate the direction of the current. And also because it's controlled, we have this diamond symbol here. So whenever we see diamond symbol, we know immediately that this source is controlled. And then we look at the symbol here. Is this an arrow? If it is arrow, that's a current source. And if it is a plus or a minus sign, that's a voltage source. And then as far as a controlling parameters, it can be voltage and it can be currents, right? And here we talk about voltage controlled and current source here. So here, this is a current source. It controlled by this voltage here. Again, this current here, I call it maybe here this I call it I of y. So I of y can be equal to 3Vx or minus, or Iy equals to minus 20Vx. Does not have to be equals to Vx. It's just for illustration purpose. Current source here, the unit of Iy is a amp, right? Although it is a function, this voltage, but that's the quantity of come into the play. Okay, so let's look at the last type of controlled source. This is current controlled current source. Again, this is a current source controlled. It is a diamond shape, right? So controlled current source, it has arrows here. So there's an arrow here. Okay, so this AIX is controlled by the current in this branch. Again, to just clarify here, I call it, this is I of y. So I of y, it can be equals to 100 IX. I of y can be equals to minus 30 IX. The unit of IY is a or a milliamp or amp, whatever it is, but that's a unit for current. Let's look at an example of inside a circuit. This is a little more realistic circuit. We get independent source, independent voltage source, and this is one device A, there's a device B, there's a device C here. And then there is a current, small I, flow through this device C. This is a controlled source, a diamond shape. It has plus sign and minus sign here. Of course, we can see this is a voltage source. It's controlled. What is a controlling parameter? It is current. So it's a current controlled voltage source. When we're analyzing this circuit, the voltage on this source is a function of the current in this branch now. To make summary sources, we can have independent source, we can have dependent source. The symbol is either round or diamond, first of all. And then we have independent voltage, it has plus sign and minus sign inside a small circle. And independent current source, we have directions, current directions inside a small circle. For controlled source, for dependent source, and we have 4 types. Current dependent source, which means that the controlling parameter is current, but the source is current source. This is a voltage source, but it's controlled by current. The source is voltage, is a diamond, and it has plus sign and negative sign here, a voltage source. And this is a controlled source, a controlled current source. It has the direction of the current, but it's a voltage controlled. There's a Vx, 3Vx. Quantity here can be anything here, 2, 3, minus 5, whatever. There's a voltage source. what is a controlling factor? That's voltage. It's a voltage controlled voltage source. So let's do a summary for the unit. We learned charge, the unit is C equivalent. So the symbol is small q, right? We learned the current, the unit is A, either big I or small I, depending on if it is a DC or a AC current. The voltage, the unit is volt, symbol is V. Energy, W, the unit is joule. Power multiplied by time, thinking about kilowatt hour, which we pay our utility. So that's the energy. And we talk about also power, the unit is watt, symbol is P.